Please, sure you take started in a couple of seconds. I could speak really public. On behalf of hostess community, I would like to welcome all of you to our school and to the 2015 Bronx CUNY EdTech Showcase. We will make sure that you fall in love with our campus and would like to come back again. It is a great honor and pleasure for the Showcase Steering Committee to see colleagues from Bronx, non-CUNY colleagues, from high school, industry, and also students. I promise you, loaded with innovative approaches to enhance teaching and learning through technology. We also provide opportunity necessary conversations about how we connect the dots, how we connect the pipeline for students. This year's theme, Beyond Higher Education, Technology and Community, together representatives from all of the areas of this pipeline: high school, education, industry, and promises great discussion. So once again, welcome to Hostos Community College. Just know that that was intended. Before we start with the program, I would like to mention some acknowledgments. And as you know, this is a very tricky part because we don't want to forget the names of everybody that make this day possible. So what I would like to do, I'm going to see whether this works. Everybody from here has a program, correct? Yes. So I will ask you to turn to page 17 in your programs. And see all the people that have contributed to make this possible, and we are sure that this day will be a total success. And we just want to know that it really takes teamwork and having an open mind to collaborate and accomplish any goal. So please join me in thanking all of them for their hard work and support for this showcase. This time is a great moment to introduce to you the members of the Showcase Steering Committee. Kay Lyons, if you can please stand up. Lisa Tapperner, Alison Bogle, Mark Leonardson, Albert Robinson, Steve Castellano, and Carlos Guevara. And we want to share with you that this showcase received the CUNY Excellence in Technology Collaboration Award in December of 2014, and this was possible because of you. So we want to thank you for making this showcase an award-winning showcase. So let me quickly go over some housekeeping for the day. This event is being live streamed, so if you have your colleagues that were not able to come, just please send a text to them to go to the CUNY, that is Bronx EdTech website, so they are able to watch this keynote, and later in the day they're going to be also, we will be live streaming the discussion panel as well. All the breakout rooms will be recorded, so you will have a time if you want to attend two talks that happen at the same time. You will be able to watch them in our website, so don't worry about that. This one doesn't need anything else for me to say, so I'm just going to leave it there and go to the next. So as you know, food and drink is not allowed in the repertory theater. This is very important. Lunch will be picked up from room B503 at 1:05 p.m. And we would like to give thanks to our lunch sponsor, which is provided by Pearson. Wi-Fi, so that you can tweet and you can share all of the great things that you're hearing at this showcase. The Wi-Fi information is at the back of your badge, so you will have it at any time with you. If you need help, just make sure just follow the red T-shirts. They will help you and they will guide you wherever you want to go in this conference. And the last thing, we're going to have a raffle, and this will take place at the reception in the afternoon. And remember, the winners must be present to claim the prizes. So without further ado, I would like to invite to the podium our president, Dr. David Gomez, to give welcoming remarks.
I'm so glad we resolved the technology. I don't know that I could shout that loudly. First and foremost, welcome to all of you to Ostos Community College. We are obviously quite proud of this institution. And for those of you that are here for the first time, we hope you'll take a few minutes to walk around, familiarize yourself with the campus, and we hope to see you back here soon. But I think if you look at your program, the agenda here is really focused on the Bronx, not on Ostos, not on Lehman, not on Bronx community, but all of us in the educational sector from K through 16. And the importance of us working together to use technology not only for the advancement of the teaching and learning process, but to provide our students and the residents of the Bronx with the skills that they will need to actively participate in the 21st century. So for all of you who give of yourselves each and every day to work with our students, my personal thanks. And as I said, for those of you who are visiting us for the first time, we hope that you will become frequent visitors and part of the Ostos family. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Alexander Ott, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs for Curriculum Matters and Faculty Development at Bronx Community College. Dr. Ott.
This is my traditional problem at a podium. Good morning and welcome. I bring you greetings on behalf of Bronx Community College and Interim President Eduardo Marty. This is truly my honor, although I have to admit to being a bit disconcerted. As you might notice, I'm the only non-president up there. When I was asked/told that I would be representing BCC and Eduardo Marty here, my first thought was yikes. The thought of filling in for Eduardo Marty, who is a legend in CUNY and beyond, is sobering. And I thought, what could I possibly say here to this audience that would hold up to a standard that, that Eduardo Marty would have? And my conclusion to that, after thinking about it for a while, was, well, nothing. I don't think I could compare. And so for a little while, I said, well, maybe I'll just come up and say hello, greetings, and sit down, which I think would probably be welcomed by a lot because I know I've sat in the audience before. But since I'm an administrator, and as an administrator, first principle is person, microphone, audience have to say something, I did want to offer a few thoughts on this. And here it is. I've attended and presented at several IT and higher ed conferences, including the New York Higher Educational Technology Forum and EDUCAUSE. What I found lacking in those conferences in general is a limited focus on how technology actually works in the classroom. There was lots of focus on IT and all the cool new technological tools. But there was very little from a faculty perspective. How do these things actually work? How do we make what's the promise of technology into the reality of improving education through technology? And that's what I see you all doing here today. When I take a look at the program, that's what I see. I see faculty members who are focused on how to make that technology live. Because without your work, the promise of technology to revolutionize higher education will not happen. And without your work, the promise of technology to bridge the gap between K-12 and college will not happen. And without your work, the promise of technology in education will remain just that, the promise of technology. Your work here today and throughout the academic year in classrooms, CTLT, and through pedagogical research will help make the promise of education, of technology in education, a reality. I thank you for your ongoing efforts, and on behalf of Bronx Community College and President Eduardo Marty, I bid you welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Last but not least, I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Ricardo Fernandez, President at Lehman College.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you all for joining us for the third annual Bronx EdTech Showcase. I especially want to express my appreciation to my colleague, Dr. David Gomez, who is hosting us this morning, today. And I also want to thank my colleague, Eduardo Marty, in absentia, for his support. And I want to stress, and I cannot stress enough, the importance of close collaboration between our respective colleges, especially between the colleges here in the Bronx. Because together, these three institutions, Ostos Community College, Bronx Community College, and Lehman College, we consider ourselves, in fact, CUNY in the Bronx. And we look at issues and try to address issues from a perspective of the entire borough. And this event, therefore, exemplifies, I think, the kind of pragmatic, solution-seeking collaborations that will improve all of our institutions. And more importantly, they will improve the kind of educational experiences that our students have. And that can only improve student success and graduation rate. In a way, the impact of technology on higher education cannot be overstated. I've been in higher education a long time, and from the time that I was a student to the time I became a professor, and then an administrator, and ultimately a college president, I would say that very few things have changed higher education more and worth thinking about. Today's students, whether they're from the United States, from the Bronx, or from other countries, no matter where they are around the globe, most of them are digital natives. That means that they came of age sometime in the mid to late 90s. And to them, smartphones have always existed. The internet has always been available to them. That's not true of me and others, many others. They live in an increasingly mobile and social world where access to information via handheld devices is nothing new. To them, And this is interesting. To them, something is new only if it was invented after they were born. Those of us who were old enough to remember when phones had a cord attached to them, and TV was black and white, and recorded music came in vinyl LPs. In fact, they're coming back. We are the ones who have to adjust. What I want to emphasize, however, is that it is not the students who have to adjust to this new world. We do. And it's important to stress that while technology makes change possible, real change is driven by people. And that point was made very clearly by a friend of mine, Ivan Seidenberg, the former chairman and CEO of Verizon, who graduated from Lehman in 1972. He has stressed this point over and over. It wasn't that cell phones disrupted the telephone industry. It was the people in the telephone industry that needed to change and use cell phones. So in a way, cell phones made change possible, but it was people who made change happen. College students today are remaking the world, and along with it, higher education. We have to adapt to this brave new world by melding our educational standards with the needs of today's students. So in this century, we know that a college degree has to be more mobile and more adaptable. We have to train students for the global economy and not for their first job out of college, or even their third job or their fourth job, or maybe their 10th jobs. There are many jobs out there now that didn't exist 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, who knows how many new positions will be created as a result of the changes that we are experiencing. Because with better technology, and I mean better, not just the gadgets and the fun things that we can do with this technology in them, but their use for teaching and learning. Higher education can better serve the needs of our students and of the job market. Because ultimately, serving students is what today is all about. There's lots to learn, much to share among us. I look forward to next year's EdTech Showcase, which we will proudly host at Lehman College, and I hope that you will enjoy the day and profit from the workshops. Thank you, and good morning.
Thank you, President Fernandez. To continue with the program, we want to share with you a message from our University Chancellor, James Milliken.
Good morning. I'm delighted to greet you at the start of the third annual Bronx CUNY EdTech Showcase. This event is a great way to share knowledge, compare experiences, and maximize the benefits technology can bring to teaching. There's little doubt that technology has changed the way our students learn. Most students who enroll in classes today never knew a world without the internet. They've been using technology since they entered a classroom. That's why it's so important that we focus attention on the effective use of education technology with high school and community college students and beyond. This will be a key to boosting college readiness, retention, and graduation rates. And I'm pleased to see how many of today's panels offer new ways to use technology with students throughout the education spectrum. This is an exciting time to be engaged with teaching at CUNY. On April 20th, we announced an historic partnership with Microsoft. By the time this agreement's fully operational in 2016, each of our students at every campus will have their own cloud storage space called OneDrive. Each student will have a mailbox capable of storing 50 gigabytes of data. And because faculty and staff at every CUNY campus have access to the same digital tools, computing and software, we have expanded opportunities for teaching and learning and collaboration. Everyone at CUNY will be able to access their files from any digital device and will be connected as never before. You and your colleagues are pioneers. You're entering new territory and forging new methods to change our approach to pedagogy. The students at CUNY will form the intellectual infrastructure of the city tomorrow, and so it's critical to our shared future as educators, as New Yorkers, as citizens, that we do everything we can and use all the tools available to develop the talent on which this city will depend. I wish you great success with today's conference, and on behalf of CUNY, I want to thank you for all you're doing to help our students succeed.
To present the keynote address and our keynote speaker, I would like to invite to the podium Mr. Ronald Berkman, Vice President of Technology and CIO at Lehman College.
Morning, everybody. How are you all doing? Okay, go out and get some more coffee. Okay. I'm so pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Ben Grossman, today. Ben is a pioneer and a change agent. He's a perfect example of what this conference is all about, bringing together technology and community. Ben is the founding principal of the Bronx Academy for Software Engineering, known as BASE. BASE is only 2 years old, and it's made an impact. It's the only school in the Bronx and one of 2 in the city that has learning about software as part of its mission. Ben and his team are contributing to the resurgence of the Bronx by providing students with 21st century skills. But the school is about more than just technology training. The underlying premise of BASE is that what's most important, and I think this is relevant to all of us, is that we use our skills to impact the world around us. Students are challenged to think creatively and strategically about their community, and classes are structured to provide real-world challenges. Ben dares us to think big and is making big difference. And these are the qualities, I think, of a real change agent and a leader. He's not waiting for permission, and he's relentless about his mission. So without further ado, please join me and realize that the students that Ben is training are the pipeline to the students in our colleges. And thank you, Ben, for your outstanding work. Please welcome Ben Grossman.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, you'll have to talk to the mic.
Is this on? Is this thing on? Oh, it is. If I talk like this, can folks hear me in the back, or is this? Ah, wonderful. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Ron, thank you so much for those words. I really can't say enough how honored I am to be here this morning. It's very much what I'm talking about this morning is the reality of this community that we are growing together in the Bronx, and getting to see, or actually not really see, the group that's with us today is so much evidence of that community. It really is a vision that's close to, I think, all of our hearts that are working with these students in the Bronx. It's exciting to be here and a part of this. So I think it probably wouldn't be such a stretch for me to connect Darth Vader to education technology, but in fact, I'm purely pandering to the fact that my 6-year-old son is in the audience, and he saw Star Wars for the first time this weekend. And so just kidding. I think the movie will be as sort of meaningful to him as it was to probably many of us. And sorry, so family first. I've got to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about BASE and who we are, where we came from. I'll talk a little bit about myself, but not too much, because that's not so interesting. What I really want to get to is actually what Vice. Is that me also? Wow, these things make all kinds of noises. I really want to get to what Vice President Berkman was talking about, which is certainly the academics, but sort of how do we go past the academics to actually having an impact. We have a little bit of time to sort of have a little bit more discussion or questions, however we can do this, if there are any. So, oh, no, skipped the wrong slide. So several years ago, so 2012, our sister school opened, but before that, there was a fair amount of discussion in the Department of Education that was prompted by a man named Fred Wilson. Fred Wilson is a venture capitalist. He's New York City based, Union Square Ventures, and he is very heavily invested, he and his partners are very heavily invested in the tech sector in New York City. And there was, his son was in school and was trying to find computer programming classes and was having trouble doing it. And the more Fred started to talk to his colleagues, the more he realized that this is a real gap in New York City public schools. Partly it's that, in his mind, students really need to know this, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But partly also, he makes the very cogent argument that his companies that he's invested in can't grow fast enough because they don't have the resources, they don't have the raw talent in this city that they would need to grow at the rate that the market would allow. And so what ended up happening was, I think, the first ever public-private partnership that created a public school in New York City. Fred, this is publicly known, Fred gave some of his own personal money to open our sister school, the Academy for Software Engineering. Does this have a little thing? The Academy for Software Engineering opened in 2012 in the Washington Irving campus in Lower Manhattan. Around that same time, I was working for the city, the Department of Education, at the district level, doing leadership and instructional support. I had been a teacher in the South Bronx for 7 years, and I was growing sort of increasingly sick of district level work and really wanted to get back to working with kids. So a colleague and I, somebody that I had talked to, the Bloomberg administration, as many of you know, were all about closing schools that they considered failing and opening new schools, new small schools. And you know, politics aside and whether or not that's a reasonable model of school reform, there's a real opportunity for folks who want to have an impact to open a new school. And so we proposed a new school. It was a 4-month process. And the original conception of this school that Scott and I were proposing was a school for art, technology, and ethics. We very much see those three things, or sort of the nexus of those three things, as central to what it means to be powerful and creative and active in today's world. At some point in the process, an office in the DOE that was working with Fred, the Office of Post-Secondary Readiness, approached us and said, we'd like to talk. We're interested in opening a second Academy for Software Engineering, and we have your proposal, and it seems like there might be some interesting overlap. Would you like to come have a conversation? And I'll be honest, initially I was reluctant. Software engineering is a very specific area. You might have noticed or guessed at this point, I am not a technologist by trade. I'm an educator. In fact, I was an English teacher. So you can't get much further away from that when you're in the classroom, right? Further from technology. So we started talking. And am I on the wrong slide? Nope, not yet. We started talking, and what got increasingly clear to both me and Scott is that rather than sort of a narrowing and a closing of doors, the idea of having a school that's centered on software engineering actually opens up incredible potential. And I'll talk in a little bit about how we treat sort of the difference between computer science and software engineering, because for those two things they're different. They're related, obviously, but not the same thing. And so the more we talked, the clearer it got that this is actually exactly the kind of school that we were interested in opening. And also they had incredible trust in us to lead the school with a vision that we saw fit. They weren't going to sort of micromanage, and Fred wasn't interested in micromanaging. Let me tell you just a little bit about who we are. So we opened 2 years ago in September of 2013. We're what's called a limited unscreened school, and I'm not sure how much CUNY folks know about the 8th grade process of applying to high schools. Unscreened schools are schools, or limited unscreened, it really means that the students choose us. We don't choose them. Students can rank up to 12 schools in order of their preference to go. And there are 3 factors that weight their application to match to a school. How high they rank a school, so the more students, the higher a student ranks a school, the more likely they are to be matched. Students who live in the borough get preference for us, so Bronx students, we are almost entirely Bronx students at this point. And students who come to some kind of information session and learn more about us are more likely to be matched. At scale in 2 more years, so we have 2 grades now, 9th and 10th. At scale will be about 460 students, excuse me. So here's some of our demographics, and I think they're pretty representative of the Bronx. About 60% are Hispanic, 35% Black, 11% Asian, 3% white. That doesn't add up to 100, I know that. My math isn't that bad. But there's obviously a lot of overlap in demographics. 90% of our students qualify for free or reduced price lunch. It's very high, but it's also not particularly high for the Bronx, as I'm sure all of you know. 27% of our students this year have individualized education plans, so qualify for special education services. That is a very high number, even for the Bronx. That's been something really interesting for us to watch. And neither Scott nor I is surprised by that number. It's very much built into our mission early on that the kind of learning that we're doing here is the kind of learning that's appealing to all different types of learners. The further you get from a more traditional approach where it's a teacher talking at a student, the more it opens up the possibility of student voice and student power within a classroom. And so it may also be the fact, I don't know how much our incoming students know all of that, so it may just be that they saw the word computer in our title and they said, sign up. That's certainly a possibility too. We have 7% English language learners, which is low. And I think maybe the most sort of influential statistic on here, or it's not a statistic, but note on here is that bottom bullet. We have an incredibly wide range of learners in the school. We have a large number of students who scored a 1 or a 2 on the reading exam in 8th grade. That's the lowest of 4. We also have a number of students who scored 4s on math and reading. It makes it an incredible challenge. So one of our computer science teachers is here with us this morning, and he can attest better than I the challenges of handling a class with that wide a range of proficiencies. I'm sure many of you know that as well. Just a little bit on our academic program. So we treat computer science as a 5th core discipline at base. Alongside math, science, social studies, and English, most of our students take 4 years of computer science. We are in process of becoming a CTE school, career and technical education. That's a state approval process, so next year we'll be applying to the state. But it essentially means that students who graduate with the CTE will get a certification on their diploma saying that they're essentially ready in some form for the workplace within a particular strand. For us, it's computer science, obviously. So that involves workplace exposure, including internships, student portfolios of work. Students who want the CTE certification have to pass the AP CSA exam. That's the well, I don't know, it's probably not worth it to give too much background on the AP exams in computer science, but it's mostly in Java, which is not an easy language to learn. We really do, as I think as the next slide shows, we really do, starting in 11th grade, we split out the CTE track students from non-CTE track students because students really need, it's a May exam, and students really do need a full year to get ready for that exam, especially students who are scoring 1s on their 8th grade math exams. Our students come to us with real learning gaps. real issues with numeracy and literacy. Ninth grade is largely about exploring computer science. We've sort of developed our own curriculum, mishmash of different things, but really the point of ninth grade is to get engaged. 10th grade split between web design and this year Python. Next year it'll be Java to be more aligned to the AP exam. And 11th grade we split. 11th grade, about half of our students we're anticipating will be interested in the CTE track. Some of them will pass the AP exam and some won't. It's a very hard exam. And we're very clear that part of what we're doing here is we're changing the role of CTE in schools. Career and technical education has traditionally been a vocational pathway. It's been for electricians or, and some very high-paying jobs. So, airline mechanics and green energy, cosmetology, software engineering as a CTE track, computer science as a CTE track. That's the new knowledge economy that we're starting to see in there, and that really is a shift. So many of our students, we're aware, won't be ready by the May of their junior year to take and pass the AP exam. I think in an ideal world, we're hoping for about 40% of our students to graduate with CTE, it may well be more like 20 or 25, especially our first year. And that's okay. We're not. One of the reasons we wait for a long time till 11th grade to track and I think many of you probably know this, that the sooner you track, the sooner it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the smart kids get smarter, and the kids who are stupid or who don't learn in that higher track, they take longer, the dropout rates are higher, and so I'm very resistant to the idea of tracking in any of our areas, as difficult as that makes it for our teachers to then go back and teach that wide range of students. So that's an ongoing discussion with us. So this is a superstar destroyer. We think Darth Vader probably has a house somewhere in here. But really, I'm just making sure Eli's paying attention. Okay, so now we get to sort of the good stuff, right? At least to me, not that computer science isn't good stuff, if there's technologists. Can I actually see, not really, can I see, how many people here would consider themselves a technologist? Okay, so we've got maybe a quarter to a third of the folks have at least a little bit of a hand showing. There's been an interesting conversation with BASE and with our sister school AFSI, with our advisory boards, and I'm going to go off script for a minute here. There's been an interesting conversation about the question of how much a school about technology we are or we should be. Technology for the sake of technology to prepare students for post-secondary studies in computer science, in technical fields. It's a very hard question to answer, and there's no solid agreement. We have a very strong advisory board at BASE, which I think is in a slide later. I'll talk a little bit about who they are. But we have a number of professors from post-secondary institutions and folks from the world of computer science. And they push us. They push us to say, if you have too progressive of a methodology, if it's too much up to the students to make the meaning themselves, they're never going to get to the place with the content, with the high level of content to succeed as a computer science major in a four-year university, given where they're coming from. And they're not wrong. The question to me is, when we gear our curriculum toward those students, what do we do to the students who aren't ready for that? And so it's a constant balance. It's a constant dance. And I think you'll probably hear where I am, if you haven't figured it out already, on that spectrum as we move forward. Even just saying now to the good stuff, right? So we see at BASE academics as one incredibly important component, but nevertheless just a component of a much larger picture of who we are and what we're trying to do. I know this conversation is happening at CUNY schools. We hear it. I know it's happening across the Department of Education. If we don't support students with metacognitive structures, development of executive function, goal setting, students don't succeed. If we lived in Scarsdale, or if we lived in Great Neck, where students are prepared from day one to go to college by their parents, by tutors, by every single teacher they ever had, that story might be somewhat different, but we're not. And nor would I be interested in opening a school in Scarsdale or in Great Neck. Students in the Bronx don't always come from backgrounds where they've been given these skills at home. And so the only way to really succeed, to build a culture of success in a high school, in New York City, in the Bronx, but in other places too, is to build this into the system. And it's not just for struggling students. This is about addressing whole students. This is about addressing who students are and meeting them at their level and empowering them in meaningful ways to make changes. That's very much what I call a progressive understanding of education, that we privilege students' abilities to make meaning. It's not about, or at least it's not supposed to be about, a teacher at the front of the room saying, here's what you need to know. And I know you know this. CUNY has very much the same values that BASE does. We have a very strong social justice framework for understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And again, I'll come back to that, what that actually means a little bit later. But really, I think the point is that it's not just the skills and the content. Those are incredibly important, and without those, students can't succeed. And without them, they certainly can't pass the high-stakes exams that are exit criteria. But it can't stop there. The point of those, the why that underlies those skills and that content, is so that they can take those and be powerful in their worlds. Just like technology is not an end in itself, it's a way of making change happen. It's a way of understanding our world. It's a lens for our world. This piece, I won't stay on this long. Restorative justice is an understanding that is growing in the Department of Education, that the best way to create a positive culture in a school is to have students be an active role in the communities. And when there is a breach of faith, when there is an infraction, when there is a conflict, it's not just about a violation of state. Like we can't think of it as simply a student is breaking a law and they must be punished. There has to be accountability to the larger culture. And it's very much, I include this not because it's so much about technology or about how we're doing that, but these are all of a piece, because this is very much about who our students understand they are, their role at base and their role in the larger world. This is very much for us, all of these, about preparing them to be powerful, engaged adults and able to transition to powerful adults in CUNYs, in other schools. So given all of that, as Scott and I were building out the proposal for this school, and even once we were approved, we were talking more and more about the question of how we do that. Certainly, we can have a strong English department that says, we're going to use this language for an essay. So I'm going to talk about an introductory paragraph this way, and then you're going to talk about it this way, the same way, and so forth. And so there'll be sort of that connective tissue across the classrooms, but that's academic. So the question to me and to us has been, how do we focus on these metacognitive skills? How do we support students across the curriculum in ways that oftentimes really elementary schools do and high schools don't? High schools traditionally, and colleges I think probably more so, have a specific focus on content. Teachers consider themselves content specialists, and at least this is the high school level. Teachers consider themselves content specialists often before they think of themselves as pedagogues. That's not the case in elementary schools. Elementary schools, when you talk to elementary teachers, they think of themselves as teachers. And in fact, it has there's reverse problems, because you have elementary school teachers, common branch teachers, saying, well, I'm going to teach you math, but I'm not really a math person. I don't really know this stuff. And so they're framing themselves as a teacher rather than a content specialist, and that's problematic in the other way. But so when we at high school levels have teachers who say, well, I'm a science teacher, and I mean, yeah, I know there's pedagogy involved, but really what's important in my classroom is the content, and students need to know this. Those teachers aren't wrong, but we lose the opportunity of this bigger picture, of this connective tissue, when we only think of ourselves in those ways. So Scott and I started investigating bigger picture frameworks for academics. We looked at, so KIPP charter schools have a character report card with like grit or stick-to-itiveness, I forget what they call it, one of those sort of like, you know, neoliberal words. We looked at habits of mind, which is a much more progressive framework for this. We looked at one of the sort of the major influences on us was the work of a man named David Connollys. And his work is worth, I want to take a minute and share it for those of you. Maybe actually this is helpful. Do people know David Connollys' work in college readiness? Okay, so it is worth taking a minute then. So David Connollys, a researcher, he sought to, I think this is on the next slide, he was seeking to problematize the notion of what college readiness means. Let's get past GPA as a predictor of who's going to succeed. Let's get past credit earning in high school as a predictor, and let's really look at the skills that colleges actually require. There were 4 big areas that he identified. Key cognitive strategies, and these, by the way, are in order, according to him, of most to least important. Key cognitive strategies. So these are the academic moves that students make, like analysis and evaluation and problem solving. Key content knowledge. Now this is disciplinary knowledge. So this is both the facts and the skills, but also the big ideas of disciplines. Key learning skills, which is, so the ways that students think of themselves as powerful as learners. So the way they own learning, the way they're able to stick to it when times get tough, persistence. And then finally, and this is often lost, I think, the key transition knowledge and skills, the idea that college is a very different place than high school, than middle school, than elementary, and that if we don't give kids explicit training in how to navigate their world, their new world in college, then students will often not be able to navigate that world. So how to fill out a FAFSA, that's on the way to college, but what matriculation looks like, how to find your resources. I have an IEP, what does that mean for me in college? I have a 504, I want to find the writing lab because I'm a bad writer. All of those questions fall into that key transition knowledge and skills. So I'm going to focus, because the piece of this that was so powerful to us was this key cognitive strategies. So we really pushed into what does that mean and how can we make that powerful at base. This is his model. This is David Connollys' model of what these key cognitive strategies look like. So let me just walk you through this really quickly. So the idea, I mean, it's circular, you can see that, so it's iterative. So problem formulation, followed by research, and then interpretation, and then communication. Oops. Followed by darkness. And then the whole thing is sort of undergirded by this notion of precision and accuracy. And so for him, the ability of a student to clarify what a problem is that's being asked, do whatever it takes to sort of understand how to solve that problem, identify solution paths, and actually find possible solutions, interpret the meaning of what they're finding, and then express that interpretation. These are the key moves for him that they're not for any one particular discipline. These go across, they span all of the disciplines. So here, after all of that research, as we were building the framework for BASE, here is where we landed. We split out these into 2 sort of crucial moves or movements that we decided we wanted to make. The first is our set of core values at BASE, and this really describes a stance in fact, in some ways, a political stance, a statement about how we believe learning works. Our core values are understanding self, valuing diversity, creating dialogue, and then finally taking action. And there's no one of these that's more important for us than another, but they do describe a movement from the earliest of those all the way through taking action. And so the idea is that in order to take action, which for us is the highest form of knowledge, of wisdom, the ability to make change, in order to do that effectively, you first have to understand yourself. You first have to value diversity and other opinions and recognize those as different than your own and create dialogue that is meaningful and powerful. And eventually, at that point, there is the possibility of meaningful action. Our students are extraordinary, and you know our students. It's the same students that you have just several years later, right? Our students are spectacular at debating in classes and would call themselves excellent at taking action, as I think most adolescents do. That doesn't mean that they're doing it in an impactful way, so that they know how to do it in impactful ways. The other area, and this is what we're going to stay with for a minute, is our learning framework. We identified for ourselves a common problem-solving methodology. It's a modified version of something called design thinking, which we'll interact with in just a minute. It's very much product-oriented, while at the same time it's very deeply human-centered. So let's jump ahead. So design thinking comes out of, a lot of places, but I think eventually it was Stanford's design school that really formalized it. So architecture, industrial design use this process a lot. And it's spread now to the business world and to software engineering and to wonderful other places, including sort of just straight, community action. It's a problem-solving process that starts with authentic questioning. And it moves through this idea that only once we understand deeply what's being asked of us can we then start to actually think about how to solve the problem. So here's a really famous example of design thinking. Let's say you're an urban planner. Okay, so let's say you're a rural planner. Not that there's such thing, but bear with me, okay? You're a rural planner, and this falls within your district. Somebody who lives on this side, let's say there's a house right back behind these trees. This person comes over to you and says, I really need to get there. There's a 7-Eleven being built over here, and I love 7-Elevens. And build a bridge, please. This is what we need, Mr. or Mrs. Urban Planner, or some rural planner, right? So I think a more traditional stance would have us start doing measurements and drawing schematics and trying to figure out how to make this happen, looking at the budget. Design thinking asks us to pause and step back and say, okay, who will this impact? What's actually being asked of us here? The person who lives over here, what do they really need? Is it a bridge, necessarily? I don't know. It's a way, at least from what we have right now, it's a way of getting to this 7-Eleven, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a way of getting the things that are at the 7-Eleven, right? So design thinking asks us to push really hard around authentic questioning and really deeply understand the context that a problem or a challenge is coming out of. And so, and I think it's probably worth saying here, 14-year-olds are some of the worst, at authentic questioning of anybody I've ever met in my life, right? So they have zero interest when we get them of listening, of hearing answers. It's part of our job to teach them how to do that. And I'm a strong proponent. If we're going to ask somebody, if we're going to assess somebody on their skill at doing something, then we better be really sure that we're teaching them how to do it. It's not fair to give an assessment on something that you haven't taught. And so part of what's happened is that design thinking is becoming a part of our core foundational skills. We're teaching students how to do each of these stages. One of the big challenges that we're finding, no surprise, is that we don't know how to do this stuff either. At least we don't know how to articulate it. And so one of the things that we're trying to figure out now is what does our professional development look like? A lot of our teachers are younger teachers and newer to the DOE, partly because that's who's applying to our school. And there's passion and engagement, and our staff is extraordinary. Our teaching staff is really just an amazing group of people, and very much embracing of this vision. But that doesn't mean they know how to teach a kid how to ask authentic questions, right? There's good materials out there, but we got to find it. We got to make this happen. And so, one of the biggest challenges we're facing is sort of what does this mean for the teaching model? How do we get folks? We have 1 week with somebody over the summer to train them. So here's another example of design thinking, and this is used a lot, is designing space for particular purposes. So if the challenge is to design a school that increases student engagement and maximizes resources, and more municipalities are going to communities and saying, we're doing a design challenge because we're building a new high school building over there, and we want your input, and we're going to do a design challenge. So the first step is what's called empathizing, asking questions, not making assumptions, really trying to figure out what the core issues are here. The second step is then taking all of that information and identifying patterns in it and coming up with new meaning, new information, and then restating the problem. Because as we said, the client in the first situation wanted a bridge, right? But it turns out maybe that's not actually the best use of money. Maybe that's not actually what the person wants. Maybe it's a drone that can fly back and forth with a slushie or whatever. So this defining piece, it turns out, is incredibly difficult because it involves a certain kind of metaphorical thinking, metaphorical leaps that are very hard to describe, hard to practice. But it's also one of the most fun things that you can do in a classroom is that practice having students step outside of the box of what's being asked in front of them to come up with new ideas. And students love it when you frame it right. Third step is ideate, which is really a fancy way of saying brainstorm. These aren't our terms. This is Stanford D School, so I'm not going to apologize for their weird terminology. So possible solution paths, exploring multiple perspectives, and then prototyping, actually building out some of the best or some of the worst, or maybe the most interesting or maybe the craziest looking. Pick 3 or 4 of the ideated ideas, and let's build those out and see what happens. And then testing and revising, really sort of going back to your end users and the people that this affects and saying, so here's what we've got, what do you think? And figuring out ways to protocols for testing. And then finally, communication. And Stanford doesn't have this as part of the design thinking process, but for us, for David Conley, for high school students, that idea of communication is just absolutely critical, because what you've done is you've taken them through a whole process of development, and now they have a product. They need to be able to articulate their process, and they need to be able to make a persuasive argument about why that product is the best, back to the end user, back to the client, back to the people in the community who have a high stake in what's happening. And what you'll see is that you've got, in these 6 steps, an incredible range of core skills that our students need, all the way from literacy to problem definition, problem formulation. There's reading skills, because empathizing is not just asking authentic questions, it's also doing incredible research with texts, so policy comes into this. So there's opportunities all through this to build really powerful skills that pervade the high school curriculum, but that mostly don't get named in these kinds of ways. We have developed a series of what we call actions. If anybody's interested in this sheet, I'd be happy to send it around digitally. These for us, so empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, et cetera. It says when I empathize, and there's 3 stages to each of these, or there's 3 steps to each of these stages. So when I empathize, I identify sources of empathy. That's your way in. I authentically engage sources of empathy to gather information. That's the process of it. And then there's the stepping back, the transition. In this case, it's use that information to see the big picture. So each of these stages has many movements within it. And this goes all the way across. I will say that we're most of the way through our 2nd year, and this is largely an aspirational document. right now. I want to be totally transparent about where we are and our capacity. It's very hard to open a new school. It's a small budget for the number of students we have. And there's a lot of learning to be done for us, both as individuals about this, but also institutionally. What this means for us, what this looks like at base. We've asked our math teachers to give a design challenge every quarter. We've asked all of our teachers to give a design challenge every quarter. And Brian, who's with us today, who teaches web design, that's the perfect discipline for doing a design challenge. Because web design is all about empathizing and defining and understanding the problem. Math, empathizing, I don't know what that means exactly. And our math teachers don't either. So we're trying it. We're trying to make sure that our kids get the skills that they need to pass the Regents exams. And that's another master that we serve as well, is the Regents exams. And our kids do come in with real needs, very content-oriented needs. And there's a lot of anxiety on the part of the staff, and me as well. The more this is a sort of plug that I'll put in, and you know this as well, the more we evaluate our teachers based on a very specific metric, like high-stakes tests that are largely decontextualized, the more anxiety there is, the more push there is to teach only those skills. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for the good stuff. Last thing I want to point out, senior capstone experience. So as our students become seniors, they will be challenged to go out into their communities and try this. They'll be going out, they'll be doing a needs assessment, and they'll come back to a panel and they'll present a possible design challenge, and then they'll actually go through the stages of design thinking in order to put that into place. We're trying that in small ways now throughout the school. We have 2 more years to figure this out exactly. But we're really looking forward to that, and that's really a critical piece of what we're trying to do here. Very quickly, successes and challenges. I think I've mentioned a number of these. Successes, I mean, this community is very much evidence of what I would call success so far. There's very much a growing community in the Bronx of schools that are paying attention to this kind of work, of schools that are seeing that there's a need for both access for our kids to high-paying jobs in the technology sector as a workforce development pathway, which is very real. 90%, remember, 90% of our kids qualify for free or reduced price lunch. There's also, the parent reception has been enormous for BASE. 1,400 kids applied for 135 spots for next fall. And we're very proud of that. Student engagement at the school is very high. We have plenty of knuckleheads, as any school, high school does, right? I'm sure you guys have your share. But you know what? They come every day. We have a 90% attendance rate, which a Bronx high school, that's very rare. And I'm sure as we grow, it'll go down. That's inevitable. But if we're anywhere close to that in 2 years, we're doing something right. Challenges, teacher pipeline, teacher development. Student needs are just incredibly high in an unscreened school like this. So this community is really absolutely critical. There are folks on our advisory board. So Majora Carter and Ron Berkman is on our advisory board. Folks from sort of the local community-based organizations like Startup Box. I was just talking about the Hive with some folks here. All of these organizations are doing the same work. They're like, you know what? There's a need, and there's a desire, and there's incredible raw talent. There's incredible potential here in the Bronx. And people are jumping into this community to be a part of it. And there's a lot of different directions. It's moving in places that we can't all predict. I think one of the things that's most powerful for me to be here, one of the reasons it's most powerful for me to be here today is that CUNY and the Bronx, the 3 schools that are here, have such an incredible opportunity and are taking that opportunity to become the leaders of this work. To see this here is to see that the work that we're trying to do in such a small way with our 230 students is actually really happening across the Bronx with the three public colleges in the Bronx. And that's extraordinary to see. And I have to say, we're humbled to be a part of this work. We're humbled to partner with these three schools. We're humbled to have any sort of piece of this work on our plates. Thank you very much.
So let's take once again to our keynote speaker, Ben. Please, another round of applause. Okay, so technology is cooperating. Our next part of the showcase are the concurrent sessions. So the concurrent sessions will be happening in the B building, 5th floor, and you will see our staff are with the red t-shirts again, and just make sure that you follow them. There's going to be two ways of getting to the concurrent sessions. You can go either outside of the building and go to the other building, take the elevators to the 5th floor, or you could also come this way, go to the elevators to the in this building, go to the 5th floor, and just walk to the 5th floor in the B building. So enjoy the wonderful presentations that we have prepared for you. Have fun. Make sure that you also tweet. The tweet for the showcase is hashtag Bronx EdTech. So we look forward to see everything that you are sharing, learning from this showcase, and we'll see you at this place again at 2 p.m. Have a good conference.